Let's talk about describing angles. I want you to imagine that you're at a pizza place and they bring you out a pizza, maybe it's just for you, and that pizza happens to be cut into four pieces. So maybe you take a slice, maybe pictured like this right here, and within the slice, we can start to think about the angle that's formed by that triangle tip in the middle. Now, when we think about that angle, we might naturally think, okay, it's a 90-degree angle. I'm coming together at a right angle. Now, when we describe an angle like this, we're not necessarily picturing it in standard position. When we picture an angle and say 90 degrees, we want to start to picture that angle in standard position. If we're just drawing a free shape like this, it's not necessarily naturally in standard position. So let's talk about what that means. Standard position means that we're going to place the angle with its initial side on the x-axis, starting with the positive direction, meaning that our initial side is going to be right here on the x-axis. Then for a 90-degree angle, we're going to picture positive angles going in the counterclockwise direction. So we're going to sweep up, and the angle that we're picturing here is a 90-degree angle. Now, if we're thinking about negative angles, we still want to start in the same initial position. But in this particular case, negative 90 degrees, we start here, would sweep down, and we would make sure to differentiate between these two angles. So angles could be positive and these positive and negative parts give us orientation. Now, I want you to think about how you could also get to different places in a different route. That's the idea behind coterminal angles. So if you think about that first picture with the 90 degrees, the terminal end is where you end up. So in this case, the terminal end is here. Okay, so the initial part is where you start, the terminal is where you end. If you wanted to get to the same place, the same terminal spot, instead of rotating counterclockwise, you could think about rotating clockwise. In other words, sweep through the opposite orientation. However, this is going to put you at the same place, but it's a different angle. So the angle that we're thinking about when we draw this picture is a negative angle, and this is actually negative 270 degrees. So what we're going to say is that 90 degrees and 270 degrees are coterminal. We'll abbreviate a little bit here, but they are coterminal angles, right, because they end up at the same position. Now, if I wanted to give yet another coterminal angle, I could go ahead and think about rotating a different direction, starting at that 90. So I want you to think about in this case, if I rotated to 90, and then I kept on rotating back again. It's a little hard to see with that yellow, but I'm going 90 and then I'm going another 360. So that sort of angle measurement is going to be 450 degrees. Okay, so we're already kind of picking up on the idea that we know there's 360 degrees in one rotation around a circle. All right, so if we're thinking about this, we can now go ahead and say 90 and 270 and 450 are all coterminal angles. Now, if I wanted to generate more coterminal angles, I can always start with my initial angle, add 360, subtract 360, and keep on doing that. So I could add another 360 to 450 and get another coterminal angle. I could subtract another 360 from the 270 and get another negative coterminal angle as well. Now, the last thing we'll talk about in this video is quadrantal angles. So I want you to focus on the word quadrant in this. The quadrants refer to our four quadrants, 1, 2, 3, and 4. And a quadrantal angle is one that ends up on the border of a quadrant. So in our case, the 90-degree angle, if I picture that terminal side, it's on essentially the y-axis. So 90 degrees is considered quadrantal. And maybe if we want to picture a different angle, maybe if I gave you guys something like negative 120 degrees. Negative 120 degrees. Remember, we're going to move clockwise. And if I go to the y-axis, that puts me at like negative 90. So I need to go about 30 more degrees, maybe something like this. Right, so we're kind of picturing negative 120 like this, and this angle is in quadrant 3. All right, guys, that's it for this video. We'll continue our discussions of angles coming up.